I am a Microsoft Community Engagement and Training Specialist, and I'll be here in the Q&A to answer any questions and share your comments. All right, here we go.
Hello and welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today. My name is Toby Line and I work for Microsoft here in Dallas, Texas as a community trainer. As you can tell from my background, I do love to read, so let's go ahead and learn all about Amelia Earhart today. So this is Little People, Big Dreams, Amelia Earhart. When Amelia was a little girl, she liked to imagine she could stretch her wings and fly like a bird. When she was older, she went to an air show. The plane soared into the sky, leaving Amelia on the ground. She wished she could go with them and see what they saw. She got a ride in an aeroplane and liked it so much she didn't want to ever come down. So Amelia learned to fly. After months of practicing, she became the first woman to fly up to 14,000 feet. With a mechanic and a pilot, she was also the first woman to try and fly over the enormous Atlantic Ocean. As they set off, she waved to the whales far beneath her. After many hours, they reached land. The world looked small, so small. The houses and cars were like toys. Even though Amelia wasn't flying the plane when they landed, she became famous. People around the world were inspired by her story. Amelia thought every girl deserved to fly. She founded a club with 98 other fearless pilots. A little later, she flew across the Atlantic all by herself. As her 40th birthday approached, Amelia decided she wanted one final challenge, to fly around the world. A brave navigator went with her. They flew for thousands of miles over oceans and jungles, and over the savannah where giraffes turned their heads in their trail. Some people said the journey was crazy. But Amelia wasn't afraid of living 1,000 adventures, so she flew like a bird further than anyone had gone before, never to return. Because Amelia always followed her own advice. If you want to do something, do it. You never know how far you could get. Amelia Earhart, born 1897, disappeared 1937. Amelia Earhart was the most famous female pilot of the 20th century. She first became interested in the planes after seeing an air show when she was nearly 20 years old. A little later, pilot Frank Hawks gave her a ride in a biplane. From that moment on, she said, "I knew I had to fly." Amelia took lessons and bought her first plane 6 months later. She used it to set a new woman's record by flying up to 14,000 feet. She was the first woman to fly over the Atlantic, first with a mechanic and a pilot, and later by herself. In 1929, Amelia was the first president of the 99s, an organization that supported female pilots. In 1935, she became the first person to fly across the Pacific Ocean, but Amelia was always keen for a new challenge. In 1937, she decided to try and fly around the world, a total of 29,000 miles. On July 2nd, she was trying to reach Howland Island in the mid-Pacific when she reported that their gas was running low. Soon after, all communications from the plane stopped. There was a massive rescue attempt, but Amelia and her plane had vanished. In 1938, a lighthouse was built on Howland Island in her memory, and today her bravery is celebrated around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everyone learned a lot about Amelia Earhart, and happy International Women's Month. Thank you. I am Amelia Earhart. I am Amelia Earhart. When I was little, people told me that girls should wear dresses and play with dolls. They said we shouldn't have unladylike adventures. I didn't agree. In fact, when I was 7 years old, my sister and I decided to build our own roller coaster in our backyard. We placed 2 planks of wood up against the side of our tool shed. Grandma's not gonna like this. The cab was a wooden packing box with roller skate wheels attached to the bottom. We greased the wood with lard so we'd move super fast. Amelia, are you sure this is a good idea? This isn't a good idea. It's the best idea. I don't think I agree with that. Of course, I got to ride first. This was my moment. Here we go in 3, 2. I still remember the wind in my face. My stomach seemed to sink. I was flying. That just looks really scary to me. Amelia Earhart, take this apart this instant. The crash was loud and noisy and messy, but it certainly wasn't ladylike. But it was awesome. That was awesome. It wasn't the last time I would fly. As I got older, I went to many air shows. When I was 23 years old, but hey, still a kid at heart, my dad took me to meet Frank Hawks, a man who would eventually set up many of his own flight records. You ready? I'm ready. For $10, Hawks agreed to take me on my very first flight. For 10 minutes, we flew through the sky and out over the Pacific Ocean. By the time I was 200 or 300 feet off the ground, I knew one thing. I had to fly. To save for my flying lessons, I worked as a truck driver, which wasn't ladylike either. Move it, Mac! A stenographer, which is a fancy schmancy word for someone who writes down what people say. Blah, 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 blah. And even a photographer. Say snook. I'm going to start saying snook instead of cheese. 6 months after I learned to fly, I bought a bright yellow used biplane I named Canary. Canary is a cool name for a plane, right? My instructor was a woman named Netta Shook. That's her real name. That is so cool. I would name my plane Fluffy because it could fly through those fluffy clouds. But here's a secret. I wasn't a natural. I wasn't the best pilot. I just worked harder than anyone else. That's enough flying for today. No, I can do better. One more flight. Most important, like that day on the roller coaster, I dared to do what many said couldn't be done. A girl flying across the Atlantic. Amelia, you sure this is a good idea? This isn't a good idea. It's the best idea. I became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, and then the first woman to fly by myself across the Atlantic. Back then, people took boats to get to Europe, sailing for weeks. Planes were still a new thing. In fact, on the day I took off, one magazine article ran an article that said women would never be able to fly that far. But I did. To do it, I had to fly for 14 hours and 56 minutes with no rest, no break. Sometimes the sun was so blinding, I could barely see where I was going. In the process, I also broke the record for crossing the Atlantic Ocean in the shortest time, doing it faster than any man or woman. This is awesome! In October 1922, I broke the women's altitude record by rising to 14,000 feet. Oh my gosh, that's so high. And in July 1931, I set a speed record of over 181 miles per hour. Oh my gosh, that's so fast. Then I broke an altitude record, which is just the fancy schmancy way of saying I went higher than anyone else. How high did I go? About 12 Empire State Buildings straight up, at a time when no woman had ever gone that high. In my life, I took many flights. Every single time, there was someone who said I wouldn't be able to do it. Never let anyone stop you. Whatever your dream is, chase it. Work hard for it. You will find it. It is the best lesson I can give you. I am Amelia Earhart. I know no bounds, and I hope you'll remember the greatest flight you'll ever take is the one no one has tried before. Never interrupt someone doing what you said couldn't be done. Amelia Earhart. Here are some photos of Amelia, age 7, Amelia in the cockpit in 1936. A picture of Frank Hawks, the pilot who took Amelia on her first aeroplane ride. Imagine if he never did that. Wow. Amelia with her first plane, the Kenner Airster biplane, which she named Canary. I would totally name it Fluffy, but that's just me. Netta Snook, Amelia's flight instructor. Thank you guys so much. And remember, I am Amelia Earhart. I know no bounds.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed our book readings on Amelia Earhart, and we look forward to sharing this experience with you again. If you would like to stay, we can go ahead and have our book reading one more time